Ooh, okay. Hello once again. It's your host, Thomas Guilday, on Guilday's Guest at WXSU LP Salisbury, 96.3. So I'm here once again. It's my show. We talk about anything and everything, and I bring a guest on to talk about comedy, history, what's been going on, stuff like that. Right now I have my friend Evan Fox with me today.
I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, I've been, I love having people on MASME on. Like, that's kind of been my running theme that's been going on, you know what I mean? And I feel like, it's a lot of fun having you guys on because everyone pretty much in MASME has very, like, demanding personalities when it comes to, like, our personability and our conversations.
But I think everyone's very different.
Yeah,
but
that too.
It's similar but extremely different.
Yeah.
We all are different kind of social abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has a whole different personality.
Yeah.
But everyone's super nice. And I love the entire club.
Yeah, and that kind of brings back to, like, one of the challenges of doing this show and, like, inviting people in MASME on is because we, by our very nature, like to be very prepared, and when we're going to speak, and especially when we speak in front of people. So, Nolan and who I had on last week, and Annie and Heather were requesting their scripts ahead of time to try and research in what I was going to talk about, but I don't give them that because that's part of my overall process when I try and talk with people, because as much as we are all very good at talking, a lot of the time we kind of have this own personal bias to where we try and lean towards controlling the conversation, and I have to put a stop to that sometimes, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's fun, like, to be in the hot seat, kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know what you're going to ask me today. I'm excited.
Yeah, so once again, we're just going to start with the intro. Where are you from?
I'm from Bethesda, Maryland, Montgomery County. I went to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School.
Yeah, you're from my neck of the woods.
Yeah.
That's Montgomery County. I live in Brookville. I went to Sherwood.
Just up the road, not too far.
Yeah, not that bad.
The DMV is a great place to grow up.
Oh yeah, and when I was younger, I kind of resented living there just because of.
It's a bubble.
It is a bubble.
It's a really big
bubble with, like, I mean, granted, there's a lot of different personalities, but sometimes the side that's near Washington really weighs down on. Like the rich money really weighs down on, and, like, the personalities of those people weighs down on the normal people like you and me.
I agree. There's a lot of money down there, and it's hard for, I think, especially where I grew up, and, like, a lot of people I knew growing up didn't really understand other people's issues and like, cultures, I think. Mm-hmm. And that's something, like, when I was growing up, I really wanted to strive to get out of this bubble and understand how other people live.
Yeah, I actually looked up recently, or maybe it was last year, how, like, the most diverse cities in the country, and I think about 7 out of the 10 were all in Montgomery County.
Gaithersburg actually has, like, one of the largest, I think...
minority populations?
Yeah, one of the minority populations for, I think it's... I don't know what group it is, but they have the largest population in Germantown.
Yeah, but it was like Rockville, Gaithersburg, Germantown, probably Clarksburg as well. I mean, those were all really, like, I got to meet a lot of different people throughout my growing up.
Yeah, it was nice. I went to public school, so it gave me, like, definitely the better side of the world. I think, like, I knew kids who went to private school. Yeah. And it was just definitely a different lifestyle. I had a few friends leave private school because it wasn't for them.
Yeah. No, my cousins were originally in private school from, like, 1st through 5th grade, and then they moved to public in, like, 6th grade, or maybe it was 8th grade, or 7th grade actually. But I remember I was like, oh, that's I kind of wish my aunt didn't send them to public school at that time. I wish she could have like gotten them into high school first, just because like 7th grade is just the worst year by far.
Oh, middle school is the worst.
I mean, middle school is terrible, anyways. But like 7th grade is like kind of the one where it's like, oh, things are going bad.
So how we worked in our high school, we went to elementary school up till 6th grade, and then we went to a new Westland middle school for 7th and 8th. So we were only there for 2 years, but they also had a 6th grade. But we didn't. My school didn't attend their 6th grade, which was kind of interesting. But middle school was probably the weirdest time of everybody's life. A lot of transitions. The girls look very different from the guys.
Yeah, and all the girls were like super tall, and like the girls like let you know that they were tall as well. You know what I mean? Like they would like slam basketballs in your face. Maybe that was just me. I mean, you know, in reality, you've known me as 5'5" Thomas Guilday, but I'm actually Gordano Giuseppe. I'm a 3'3" man on stilts.
Oh no,
they're really good stilts.
They do look like some good stilts.
See? Right there.
Ooh. All right, everybody. He's got some nice wooden peg legs on.
They're sweet. Oak, actually.
Okay.
But have you been listening or watching anything recently?
Actually, so I started watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show, but then I stopped. I got maybe 4 episodes in.
I stopped the same time.
It just... I can't understand how a human would do that.
I was uncomfortable.
And I don't like the glorification of these people. I really don't like that at all.
I don't know if it's like glorified or like, because I'm like fascinated by it, but in a way that it's like, how could you turn out like this? You know what I mean?
And the only reason I don't am I against the show is because a lot of these victims weren't. Like the victims' families weren't even told prior from Netflix releasing it. Yeah. And that definitely causes so much trauma. Yeah. To be brought back up.
I mean, plus, I see a lot of stuff on social media where it's just like, like guys talk about, because I've noticed this a lot more with like the guys that I've talked to about the show. They're like, yeah, I'm like really uncomfortable watching this show. I don't really like it, and it makes me like really uncomfortable. And then women kind of go, oh no, I watched it like all across the bat, like in a row, and they're like, and they're like eating popcorn and stuff, and I'm like, well, maybe your guys are like kind of more comfortable watching the show just because like none of the victims were women.
Oh, due to him being like only targeting
men, and only really targeting. People of color,
African American men,
and it kind of makes me wonder, is it like kind of not a glorification in a way, but like a disconnect with some of these people who can't really see themselves in like the eyes of the victim,
and
because
they
wouldn't be the victim, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because his targets were all gay men, So that's kind of the part where I was really uncomfortable, because like, when you kind of fit some of the target demographics, it's like it becomes a bit more real.
It did, and the show was scary. How like the neighbor, the show just showed a lot of details of what the world is like, world issues back then. Like this neighbor wasn't being like recognized. I mean, the first episodes, that's what I was like picking up on. And then also, I just watched a recent video about the guy who killed Jeffrey Dahmer in prison. And they kind of like made the prisoners, or the guards kind of like set it up. And I think he's kind of being promoted as a hero now. So like after this TV show. Because I think in the end of the show they talk about him a little bit. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh yeah, I think there was like a scene, there's like some scenes later on where that person was actually a character. Okay. I don't know if they I think they did actually film the killing. Oh. Or, reenacted, like in a scene, but...
So a show I have actually been enjoying watching is called The Midnight Club.
Midnight Club.
It's on Netflix.
Is that about cars?
No. It's like it's really sad. It's about these kids who all have cancer. But they go to this house, and the house is haunted, and they all meet up at midnight, and they talk about these stories, and the house was owned by a cult, and there's ghosts involved. It will make sense at the end, I think, but it leaves you, it's cliffhangers every time. Yeah. I'm really into it.
I've been watching Mindhunter
Okay.
recently. If that's that show on Netflix where it's kind of like I guess it's a fictionalization of the start of the behavioral sciences unit in the FBI.
Actually, I watched the show.
Yeah.
It was a really, really good show.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird. I was watching it last night, and I was looking at them, and they were doing all this research on the person beforehand, and they were doing all the research on, like, previous cases and stuff like that, and then they were going into the room with a mic and recording, and I woke up this morning, and I'm like, hang on a second. That's kind of what I do here. I just interview people, and
how that show started, I was kind of shocked that the FBI didn't really believe in psychoanalyzing these people. Like, they just wanted to, like, there was no reason behind these killings.
Well, I mean, you got to think back. I mean, how recently has psychology really been accepted as, like, a part of modern sciences? You know what I mean? I mean, as far as, like, psychology went for, like, probably 30 years, Sigmund Freud was, like, the top of the top, and his theories were, which, like, looking back, some of them really didn't make any sense, and he wasn't that good of a scientist.
What's the creepy one? The one where you, like...
You are attracted to your mother.
And you want to kill your father?
Yeah, and you want to be your father.
That's a weird one.
Yeah. And, but, looking back, some of the stories about Sigmund Freud when he was, like, probably a grad student or something, he was sent to, he was doing something in science where he had to dissect eels to figure out what the population of male to female eels were. And he, like, dissected 50 of them and claimed that they were all girls because he couldn't find any male parts, but he was just really bad at dissecting.
So he wasn't probably the smartest.
No, he definitely had some issues. So there's that. But yeah, sorry. Just taking a little sip of my drink there. Just want to quickly move on from what we were watching. Have you been, like, working out recently?
I actually just started going to the gym.
Yeah.
I used to run cross country.
Yeah.
But now I just started running again. I ran 2 miles the other day.
Nice.
But it's beating on me, and I need to get some running shoes because I can already, like, kind of feel the
I need to run too, just because I used to wrestle.
Okay.
So, like, I did a lot of cardio and, like, a bunch of, but, like, it was a lot of cardio strength stuff. So it was a mix. It was a mixed bag, and it was just like, oh, I used to be like,
wrestling was fun. I did almost every sport just to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Wrestling was fun, but it was also, like,
it was
a little too much.
It was intensive. Oh, well, okay, yeah, but, like, I don't know. Once you just, like, kind of once you get into it and stuff like that, it all just becomes, like, working out.
Well, I did it in, like, a few of my competitions. We had to wrestle girls, which I thought was, like, interesting. I was like 12 at the time.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I fenced once before, which is actually really fun.
I think that would be fun.
It was fun. I did that for like 2 years. It was a great time.
Nice. Do you know the official sport of Maryland?
Is it what, like pickleball?
No, it's jousting.
I don't think I've ever seen a jousting. Actually, at the Renaissance Festival.
Yeah, apparently Maryland's, like, kind of famous for our Ren fairs.
Really?
I think so. Just because, like, I've seen so much about them.
It's a great time. It's been maybe 2 years since I've gone.
There was one at.
It's right outside of Baltimore.
There was one outside my, like, neighborhood one time.
Oh, really?
A few years ago, yeah.
There's a nice big one right and outside of Baltimore. That's a lot of fun. They have, like, the big turkey legs. They have jousting and, like, nights. It's all fun. It's all.
Alrighty. So, moving on to the Norm Macdonald joke of the week. Norm Macdonald's my favorite comedian. I like to say a joke every single week, one of his jokes. And this week's joke is, me and my wife, we like to do a little bit of role play, in the bedroom. And so she will dress up as a nurse, and I will dress up as a nurse. And instead of going to bed, we just get really frustrated when someone buzzes for juice.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That's it.
In the hospital?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They sit behind the desk and they get frustrated when people buzz for juice. So, he's kind of like an anti-joke hero, in my opinion. But, also, sorry, audience. my script got corrupted last second, and I really had to throw this one together. I'm usually a lot more prepared than this, but I'm trying to get through it. We seem to be good on time. I just it's killing me that I don't have all the effort that I put into it. My the theme for this week was supposed to be end of the world.
We can talk about end of the world.
No, but it was all the time. It was basically all the times that people had predicted the world would end.
Okay, like the Incas
wrongly.
2012.
Yeah. I was going to talk about more of kind of the individual stuff, like some of the more interesting ones. Because, we've all heard about the Incas and, the Mayan calendar and stuff like that.
This is not the end of the world, but it was, the end, the economical, so it was, this time, it was when people didn't know what was going to happen when this number hit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was Y2K.
Y2K, that was an interesting one. That was before us, I think, or maybe when we were younger.
It was, we weren't born, but it was pretty much leading up to 2000.
Yeah, they didn't know what was going to happen to all these banks and everything when it hit.
Yeah, because strangely, we had conducted the year as just two numbers, the last two numbers,
99.
We weren't sure how it was going to roll over and be like, oh, it's 1901 or it was 2001. It ended up just being 2001. And it was a simple fix for some of the older computers that were just oh, it's 19. But our systems worked it out. We're actually supposed to have another one that's kind of similar in the next probably 10 years. I forget what date it is, but it's when the 32-bit counter, which is how all these different computers tell time, is it every single tick it adds one to the counter, and it will have reached its maximum value at that point, and it won't go any higher. But all we have to do is just convert to a 64-bit counter, and that counter will count, I think it's something way past the heat death of the universe.
Okay, so we'll be fine.
So we'll be fine.
And you're talking about natural end of the world or man-made disasters?
I was mainly going to be talking about all the times that people had claimed the world was going to end, or doomsday,
Like the cults.
Cults. Some random people. Martin Luther who started the Lutheran Church was one of them. He said one. There were some interesting ones.
The Scientology, I think they have one too.
They have one, but they don't predict it.
Okay.
And it was strange for me because I was looking back and I was just kind of okay, so if you were the leader of a religion, whether or not you saw yourself as a cult or if you saw yourself as telling the truth, right, or even if you saw yourself as being a liar and manipulating people, why on earth would you ever try to protect the end of the world? Because it's the biggest, it's the lowest risk-reward system I've ever seen, where the risk if you're wrong is extremely high, and the reward if you're right is the world is gone.
And then but also
so it doesn't really matter what your prediction was at the end of the day, was it? Did it?
Because no one would know. If you were right, everyone would just be gone.
Exactly. So why wouldn't you have just kept that to yourself?
It's interesting. What are your thoughts on a nuclear holocaust?
I don't like to get into current politics on my show, but it's not good.
No, it won't.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fan of swaying any way, saying it will or won't happen. Just because I've got bad enough luck as it is, you know what I mean?
And how would the world end naturally? If someone says it's going to end on this day, just the world just disappear? What do these prophets believe that are going to happen?
Well, the actual the actual thing that's probably going to happen to destroy the end, the world would be the sun swallowing the earth.
Just being pulled in the gravitational pull.
Well, the sun is expanding all the time. In a few billion years, probably 7 billion, 1 to 7 billion years, which by that point...
The sun's expanding. I thought it was shrinking.
No. Because of the sun is a giant fusion reactor, basically.
Yeah.
So it just combines its atoms to create bigger atoms.
But it will go out one day. I mean, not
it will
not for trillions and trillions of years.
It'll probably be like in 10 or so billion, But like at that point, I don't think the human race will be around. But I mean, that's a long time, a billion years, and I don't think ours goes supernova. It won't turn into a black hole, and it won't turn into a white dwarf, but it might go supernova. But at that point, all of the planets in our solar system will have already fallen into it, or they'll be a part of it. What?
I was maybe like colonization of Mars. What do you like?
Oh, I think that would be.
We can make that in the next 30 years, maybe.
I think we can start in the next 30 years. I think the terraforming is going to take hundreds.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's nice it's a nice idea to have to put all of our eggs in, not have all of our eggs in one basket. Just consider. I mean, it's going to take a while to develop the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Just because like Mars used to have an atmosphere.
The poles are off put.
Yeah.
And I've like heard theories if you nuke the poles, it's not. If you nuke the poles, it can reset the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that's just like a theory. But
yeah, a theory that some chronically online guy had. I mean, just like it doesn't make sense because that's not going to help reset the.
No, the world would be nuclear.
Oh,
radiation would be
you mean
everywhere.
here?
No,
on Mars.
You nuke the poles on Mars, and it would reset it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so because that's not going to create any oxygen. Or sorry, it won't create any gas like
an atmosphere. Yeah, the atmosphere they're not there.
Yeah, it's not. It used to be. Mm-hmm. There's signs that there used to be an atmosphere, but it most likely was blown away by a solar flare of a giant size. And
there's water on Mars now that we've discovered in the last 10 years.
I mean, there's ice. I mean, well, yeah, but like if we could find some like running water, that would be like ideal because it would show that okay, well, because ice isn't a potential for life.
No, yeah,
liquid water is.
Yeah.
So that would be a potential, and that would be an interesting find geologically and biologically. But have you heard what NASA within the past week has done?
No, what have NASA done?
NASA conducted a test with the Operation DART, which was far away, which was a satellite that they crashed into an asteroid that was...
Oh, I did hear about it. It was successful. It was their asteroid, to stop asteroids from colliding with the world.
it wasn't going to collide with us.
Yes.
But it was a test to see if, we could alter the orbit of both... Because how they did it was, instead of hitting the supermassive asteroid, they hit the smaller one that was orbiting around it. Because a lot of these supermassive asteroids have smaller ones orbiting around.
Okay.
So that would be the easier of the two to manipulate the orbit of. And I think the smaller one was around... It's like the size of the Eiffel Tower.
Okay, so not
small. No. But, significant enough to where it would alter the orbit of both objects. So they successfully did it, which was, it's kind of a cool thing to know that, we've kind of gotten... This is, the first real step into affecting the universe around us. I mean, yeah, we've had expeditions where we went to Mars and stuff, and we've had the moon landing and stuff, but we've impacted the consistency of our own solar system in a way this time. And it's kind of a cool thing to think about in that way.
Yeah, we affected some outside force coming into our system because you don't know where this asteroid's coming from.
Exactly.
Light years away.
Exactly, and it just goes to show. I think I've got a cousin who works on stuff for NASA, and his whole thing is he's designing stuff for detection of asteroids
so we can find them before.
Yeah, because there's so much stuff in our atmosphere, and but that's what he does, and I've listened to him, and it's pretty cool. And that family out there, they're in California, that entire family is like super smart. Like another one works on like electron microscopes.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was 10th grade, and he showed me pictures of actual aluminum atoms on his phone, like real atoms.
They can take photos of atoms now. They have
the electron microscope shoots a bunch of electrons at a surface or whatever, and you can actually like see. You can see the atoms.
Have you heard of this thing called dark matter?
Yeah.
So I have a friend, crazy smart. He's a physicist, and he is actually in Switzerland working at this quantum generator.
Yeah. Trying to detect dark matter.
And they actually can like make it there somehow, and they can but dark matter can't touch anything.
Well, yeah.
So
because it's the stuff that's between the stuff, right?
It's between the stuff. So it does exist.
Yeah.
But it exists in nothing.
If you had a sandwich, right, and if you were to say that all the atoms were the bread, the meat, the cheese, and the lettuce, all the air outside of it would probably be the dark matter.
Yes. So they're somehow trying to figure out how to like create and then use this dark matter.
Yeah.
It's insane. He was trying to like explain it a little bit to me, but
I try my best with quantum mechanics because one of my fascinations is with nuclear energy and nuclear reactors. That's one of my like nice little knowledge circles.
So one of my dad's friends, he actually is a consultant. He goes to all these nuclear waste facilities across the United States and does checks on them.
Yeah.
And sees how like secure they are. And a lot of these nuclear facilities are not very secure across the United States. Which the terrible thing is, we have a facility in New Mexico.
Yeah, I know that one.
That is built. It's a mile-deep hole in the ground.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
That we're supposed to put all our waste in, but states have now like stopped the transportation of nuclear waste. So we can't bring all the nuclear waste there. So it's an interesting thing. He like goes to all these places and checks. But nuclear waste is the best thing or nuclear power is the best.
The best.
Is the best. It's the best.
I mean,
we need to stop and we need to be able to push. Do more research.
It's insane just because like it pains me to see that the research behind this stuff is really stopping, because from what I understand about it all is we have the potential to, if we continue to researching on a path that or an exponential rate that we've done like since the 60s, right? We could essentially eliminate the waste or just reuse the waste over again.
We just don't know what to do with this
I know with the stuff that we already have, but
and it lasts so long. It's radioactive for so long.
Yeah, but I mean, if we can eliminate the waste, then we don't have to. We only have to deal with the stuff that we've made. So we have to kind of keep. And besides, it creates less waste than all the other stuff.
It does, and it's more effective than wind energy.
It causes less deaths than wind energy.
And wind energy actually is really bad for the bird population.
Oh,
it is like
also
you wouldn't think it to be that bad. It's like very, very.
Do you
bad.
know the giant solar generators, the ones that aren't photoelectric, the ones that are just mirrors in the desert pointed at a boiler tower?
No, I.
There are giant arrays where it's just a bunch of mirrors pointed at a singular tower to generate a lot of heat.
Okay.
To turn water into steam, and then roll a generator. And which pretty much 95% of all generators just do that. They just turn.
And that's what nuclear power is too. It just
nuclear power, but photoelectric is different. That one actually is. It just takes the rays from the sun, and at least to my understanding.
And then solar power is just not cost affordable yet.
It's still nuclear energy by far is the safest in terms of deaths in the industry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, think about this. Wind power, you have to climb up the thing or, get a giant crane. That's a lot of...
But the only bad thing about nuclear power is when you do have a meltdown and these facilities do experience... And that's why it gets so much bad reps. Is because, in Japan...
Well, the thing about Japan is they had, a minimal...
Tsunami.
Oh, that was
messed up the...
Yeah, that was a unforeseen event. So I understand that. Chernobyl is a different circumstance because...
Soviet Union?
No, it was the type of reactor that they used. All of the Western reactors that we have in the United States their default state, right? When no energy or no one's controlling it, right? Their default state if all the fuel was in it, is off. There is no fusion, or there's no fission occurring within the fuel cells. So that's our default state. So if everything goes wrong, the reactor's off.
Always.
Yeah, because that's just how it is. But in the RBMK reactors in the USSR, their default state was on. So they needed to have constant monitoring of these systems if failures occurred so that they could turn it off.
And it takes time to turn it off.
Exactly. And how it was basically the explosion happened because of fail-safes that they didn't really think about, and it was cheap, and they didn't. The only thing that created that was just the stopping or potential stopping of misinformation that was true. And so they use graphite tips on their control rods, and the control rods are the things that you shove into the nuclear reactor to stop fission entirely. But graphite is something that slows it slows the nuclear particles down, the neutrons. Naturally, nuclear fuel, what is it?
It's fast.
No, the neutrons, they spin around and they are released quickly, but they're released so fast that it's actually called flux.
Okay.
They're released so fast that they can't actually ever hit each other, and they can't ever affect each other. So they don't produce any fission. They just radiate.
And that's why when they hit, that's a fusion bomb, basically.
When they hit in a set row, yes, but it's a lot more different than that. But the concept of reactor in terms of nuclear reactors is a lot more simple, where it's just the flux gets slowed down, and then it starts generating heat from all the fission that's going on, and then from that heat we heat up water. But graphite in the control rods, you don't want something that is. Graphite would be around the normal fuel rods. They would be entirely surrounded by graphite in order to slow them down and heat them up. But you don't want graphite in your control rods because that will continue to slow them down, which means it would continue to heat, and your control rods wouldn't actually be doing anything. They would just continue heating up. So it was cost effective, but if certain failures occurred, it would cause huge problems.
And their basic state was on, so they're not used to turning it off.
Well, their basic state was on, so if other safety features failed, the reactor was going to stay on. There's nothing they could do.
And then it created the elephant foot. Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen there's one photo I think that exists of the elephant foot.
No, there's tons.
Oh, there are tons?
Yeah.
Okay. It's this massive ball of...
Yeah. But right now it's actually pretty safe.
Yeah, no, they actually, but recently before this whole
2018.
conflict, yeah, they put over that dome.
Yeah.
Now it's all sealed up.
Yeah, and people were, there was one of the YouTubers who like to prey on certain things where it's oh, the planet's crust is gonna blow up in Yellowstone or something. And it's you don't know that, you don't know what you're talking about. They have a cooling pad underneath the elephant's foot. It won't really affect us.
I follow this guy on YouTube called Bald and Bankrupt, and he travels around Eastern Europe, or Western Europe, no, Eastern Europe, sorry. And I think Eastern Europe is a really interesting part of the world that no one really kind of goes to. And he went to Chernobyl, and there's still old people that still live there. And they're fine. I mean, they're not fine, but they're.
I mean,
they live off the land, and they definitely have radiation poisoning, but they're happy there.
I mean,
it's just interesting. They just never left.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to leave, especially when you don't know where you're going, or what.
Yeah.
I mean,
there was a whole city there that's just now abandoned, and there's the amusement park that was there before, and it's still there.
And
it's kind of sad now that it's a tourist attraction now.
Yeah, I might want to go just to see it.
Oh yeah.
But
if Dev comes down over there.
I honestly think that was probably that was the final thing that made the USSR fall.
You think so?
I mean, Gorbachev said it was. So, that was the leader at the time.
And then Putin is, I believe Putin's probably the wealthiest man in the world.
I don't know enough about that.
He has mega yachts that get seized by the
government. Yeah, I know.
And they're insane.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't really pay much attention to rich people because I feel like that life's boring. You know what I mean? It's just boring. But speaking of the USSR, all Western media was pretty much banned back then. Yeah. So, and we kind of have some of the best music comparatively, especially with rock. So what they had to do in order to get vinyls in, more or less, and get music into the USSR at the time, they took discarded X-ray sheets, right? Mm-hmm. And then they they would send those out to the United States or whatever across the border, and someone would put them underneath a light, some sort of light, take a picture of them, and the imprint of the vinyl would be on the X-ray paper. Oh, and they'd send it back, and it would probably play a really, really terrible version of that song on a record player.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that's such, because their culture was so isolated for so long. It's really interesting. Yeah,
and I just think that's a long way to go for music. But then again, what do I know? I have music in my pocket right now.
Oh my gosh, the smartphone is crazy.
Yeah. Another USSR story. Do you know there's a park in Aspen Hill in Maryland that used to be a meetup for USSR spies?
In Aspen Hill, really?
Yeah.
For Russian spies?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. They used to hide microfilm in the tree trunks or the bark of trees.
Did they end up getting caught? That's why that's known now?
Yeah, someone got caught or something, but it was strange because I think there are still some Congress members who funded that project of that construction of that Aspen Hill project and are still in Congress.
Of that park?
Yeah. So, that's kind of it. I mean, I think that would be a huge blemish on my conscience, more or less. I mean, that's dicey.
Representing a sitting congressman who had involvement with
Russian
spies?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of a strange thing to think about was oh yeah, I guess some of the Congress people were.
I mean, it's really interesting to see how much Russia has fallen. They've become more isolated.
Yeah.
And now China has kind of stepped up as the number one and number two person, especially in industry. Just due to the lack of industry in Russia has definitely depleted.
Really, I don't really consider Russia to have a real industry, more or less.
No, but they did in the Soviet Union.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's what I'm saying,
but I consider basically Russia to solely be a source of raw resources.
Yes, it's
even today.
Untapped raw resources.
That's all they. Yeah, that's not even production. That's just shipping of products. That's not production.
And I mean, half of Russia. I mean, I think it's even more than half of Russia is just nothing. It's just wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know. Alaska is just you can see Russia from Alaska.
Yeah.
And it's just untouched.
Do you know a huge percentage of Alaska? There's one family. There's only one family that can go on a gigantic chunk. I think it's 40% of Alaska. There's only one family that can travel across that land and go in there. And once their grandchildren die, no one will be able to touch it.
Is it going to go to a national park or?
It will be a preserve like no other preserve. It will be illegal to cross those lines.
That would be good. That's nice. I mean, the world needs more places like that.
I mean, that's going to be a huge chunk of the world that's just untouched. I mean, untouched, quote unquote, just because, we're always going to have an effect on that, whether we like it or not. But, there's going to be, I'm sure somehow plastic would end up there or stuff. I mean,
Imagine, going to California before, untouched before any of the settlers ever came.
Yeah. That was a huge thing when I was in California this spring break.
It's a beautiful valley, the perfect temperature.
I mean, I was hiking up a mountain, and I was just like, once I got to the top at what was it? It was I think it was Point Loma.
Okay.
And there's this giant statue and stuff like that, and I was just like, if this was like, and there was like a church or something up there, and I was like wondering to myself, what's with all these huge expeditions where, the people would explore to the ends of the earth, and these people were just like missionaries, like they were just like, they really liked the Bible, that's it, and they liked hiking.
I actually just watched another video about there's these tribes in Brazil that have never been, that are there's like 10 tribes that have been completely isolated by society, and Brazil's like motto is to leave them that way, but still like missionaries, like Christian missionaries, want to spread their beliefs.
There's like 2 North Sentinel Islands. There's actually 2 instances of this. They're both called the North Sentinel Island. There's one in India and another one somewhere else where it's completely 2 untouched tribes, where they don't even those tribes in Brazil are untouched, but I'm sure they trade. I'm sure they trade.
What's been happening in Brazil is they've been trying to stay isolated because of these missionaries have been coming and they're bringing disease. It's just like in this is a really interesting theory. I don't, how like the Golden City of South America, and how these Spanish explorers came, and the first ever explorer, he sailed through the entire of South America and then back, and he wrote down saying he saw massive cities with millions and millions of people. And then 40 years later, the next Spanish explorer came over, didn't see anything. All he saw was jungle, didn't see any people, just saw I think maybe small tribes. And now that they're looking at the world with these new technologies, they have these planes that can bounce off the ground and see geographical structures. And these cities are still there. And they're not there anymore because it was all made out of wood. It's all, the jungle just ate them up. But these millions of cities, of people cities, were devastated. But when this first Spanish sailor came and brought smallpox, disease.
I'm sure that did happen, but my whole thing is, when you're doing a job, how, especially in sales, like they teach us in sales, when they ask you how much do you want your quota to be, what percentage do you actually give them of what you think you could get?
Something less.
It's like 75% of what you think you can actually get, because you can then get over it. So I'm like, well, if you travel across the world and you want to fund and become like a governor of somewhere, right, and have your own country named after you, what are you going to tell the king when you get back?
No, I agree with you saying he's not as truthful, but they've actually now they've seen that these rivers and that they've
there's been large civilizations,
and there's this type of soil that only these cultures back there used to know how to make. It's because the jungle soil is not fertile for crops, right? But they managed to burn the crops and make this type of soil that is used to grow crops on, and we still don't know how to make it. How they did, it's like a lost technology. Just like Greek fire's lost. We don't know how to make Greek fire. Yeah.
Then again,
it's kind of.
I would like to think. I'd like to see if, how effective that would be in today's world, just because of the amount of,
It's just impressive back then.
With
what they have.
For sure.
With what they had and no technology.
Yeah. Speaking of interesting soil. In Idaho, where we grow most of our potatoes and wheat and stuff, there was actually millions of years ago a volcanic eruption that happened that was massive, that covered the entirety of Idaho in this volcanic ash that then became extremely fertile. So that's one of the reasons why we farm a lot of our.
I know potatoes are big.
Farm a lot of our. What's that? It's not simple sugars, but it's starches. That's where we farm a lot of our starches. Just because it's so nutrient rich, and it grows, it does impressive crop yields. So around this eruption site, there was, the ground is completely covered by farms.
Really?
Yeah.
The mountain's probably still, the volcano's still a little bit there.
There's mountains.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Idaho.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of Brazil, did you know that there's actually a tribe of Confederate descendants living there?
No.
Yeah.
In Brazil?
Yeah.
Interesting.
they're proud to be rebels, but also they speak Spanish. It's really strange because I was watching
a lot of bad groups like to go to South American High.
Yeah,
like the Nazis.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Italian mob has moved a little bit over there
There's
as well.
there's quite a bit of there's a few German towns in Argentina, full of like a bunch of white people, that like.
How'd they get there?
Oh no, we know, but no, but it was weird because like you'd look at them and like some of these older people in that village, in Brazil, like they were like they looked like they had very pale skin, right? But they very much like they had like a weird kind of look to them that like it was strange. It was just like looks like normal Brazilians, but like just paler, like a lot paler, and like I guess they spoke Portuguese instead.
Oh really?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Because Brazil doesn't speak Spanish.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Brazil speaks Portuguese.
Oh really?
Yeah.
The Portuguese were the first.
They colonized Brazil
first. Okay.
But like Spanish colonized everything else. Yeah. Pretty much.
It's honestly, I wish it would be really interesting to see the world if these like Spanish cultures did succeed and weren't like the Aztecs. They built massive pyramids, and they were still there when the Spanish came. It's not like the Egyptians; they were gone when Alexander the Great came. And they were still there. But like the culture, the people who built those pyramids were still alive.
Yeah.
Or who built the temples? What are they called? They're not called pyramids.
Yeah, they are. In like Mexico and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pyramids.
They're pyramids?
Yeah. They're in a triangle shape. They're close enough. I mean, it's whatever. But did you know that actually when the pyramids of Giza were rediscovered, I believe, they were rediscovered around like, the Romans' time, probably around 50 CE-ish, like around there. The distance between the us and the Romans discovering it was far less than the distance of time between the Romans and then being built.
Really?
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, you have to have seen a lot of people think the pyramids are built by aliens. Or like they had some help because like the limestone that they use. I mean, everyone talks about these theories. The limestone quarry is like 10 miles away.
I just gotta think though.
How do they haul these massive rocks that far?
I just gotta think though. Life back then must have been boring. What else are you gonna do besides build a pyramid though?
It's insane.
I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone had a little pyramid in their house. They were like, "This is our little family pyramid we like to build every Sunday."
No. The pyramid was but the pyramid is a tomb.
Yeah.
It's a homage to the
some of the pharaohs. Yeah. But like, in reality, they like if you would consider yourself like as a normal person, right? And then you go back then and you'd be like, "You want to start building something?"
No, but it's the mathematics. Like, how do you manage to build a square and know that if I
just have smart friends?
I had some really smart friends back then.
But I love that whenever people are like, "Oh, but the sophistication." I love these people on the YouTube.
I mean, they were smart.
For sure.
They had.
But I love these people on YouTube who like to draw lines on the planet and say, "This line matches up directly from the pyramids of Egypt to the pyramids in Mexico."
I've seen them,
and I'm just like, "Hey, man, I don't mean to tell you this, but when you draw a line in the globe, it's going to lead directly where you drew the line."
And they were built by different people in different time periods.
Yeah, but it's like, they're on the same line across the planet. It's like, yeah, dude, you drew that line. You drew it. They're on that line that you drew. Yeah, you're right. They're there. But, do you want to get into Tesla cars?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah.
Within the next,
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The man, the myth. Tesla cars have not made any profit, and actually today is the day they're releasing another earnings statement. But you're not a big fan of Tesla cars. You were saying that the production, and I kind of agree. I've seen a lot of videos about they're just not made with like care.
I think a lot of the time they overpromise and underdeliver, especially when it comes to the technology that they have and the technology that they claim to have. Mm-hmm. Because I understand that this is an AI system that is constantly learning and stuff. However, I don't think you are going to have a good AI system until you physically have other AI systems working congruently with all the other brands on the market. And that's why I think that their self-drive feature, quote unquote,
yes.
right, which is just, it's just smart cruise.
It's a more advanced cruise control.
Yeah, but like Chevy's got one of those. But like Chevy's is kind of cool because
my Prius has cruise control.
I mean, mine has, yeah, but like I'm talking about the new ones are adaptive cruise control, which is like one that like every new car has now, where it's like it'll detect a car in front of you and it'll slow down and match that speed. But Chevy has one that instead of using an AI system, it just uses pre-mapped approved roads and road networks that and you can take your hands completely off the wheel, and it actually has a camera, infrared camera, that tracks your eyes.
So do you actually know that a lot of these car companies are selling this data? I actually didn't know this.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I never knew about that until, which I was very surprised.
I mean, that's the thing. They have, like, you got to think about it. They have to do this in order to create a self-driving car. Yes. You're going to have to collect all this data. And that's one of the reasons I think that the self-driving feature is being charged, right? Because, and that's kind of the reason why I think a lot of the progress of it is slow, is because the moment the Tesla says, okay, that's it, fully self-driving, that's the minute that Congress is going to step in and say, hey, you need to give all this data and all of this information to all of the other car companies and have these systems available in all the other cars within the next 2 years. Because that's going to be the new standard safety feature, like airbags and seatbelts.
Because I remember like the first guy who made the seatbelt was like, he gave it to everybody. He didn't even patent it.
It was Volvo.
Well, they're like, everyone needs to have this.
Yeah.
Saves lives.
Yeah. But that's the minute that, there's going to be, and then they won't be able to charge anyone anymore. It's going to be a required part of cars at that point.
Speaking of Elon, I don't know if you heard about this with Ukraine, his free internet service that he provides. He's now like,
he's trying to roll back.
He's trying to ask the government, United States government, to pay for.
Yeah.
And apparently some of the European countries were paying him for it, but it's interesting that he's like kind of holding this as a.
It was a weird thing because it's a weird strategy to do because, to be real, no one asked him to do it.
Yeah, no one asked him to do it.
But also, if no one asks you to do something, do you really expect payment in return? Sometimes I'm like, I get it. Like, if someone invited me to help out their family move and stuff, and then, it gets to the end of the day, and then they, like, don't pay me, I'm like, okay, but this isn't right.
Maybe take me out to dinner.
I mean, if it's like, oh, you took me out to Chick-fil-A, but I just did, like, back-breaking labor for 8 hours. Yeah. It's like, okay.
There should be some compensation.
Yeah, like, I could have been doing so much other stuff right now. But, so I get it and stuff, but at the same time, it's like, these people definitely need a service or whatever, but.
And, Ukraine actually is doing very, very well now. They're not very well, but they are.
It's. I don't really follow up much just because there's certain aspects to things like war and stuff that I can't ever really. You can't really ever judge what's going on unless you're there or someone's won.
The weird thing about this conflict is that this is the first 21st century major conflict that we've had, and it's being like GoPro'd and televised and recorded. And I think it's kind of showing the realistic of it, which is bad and good at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to say that, or I don't like to keep anyone's hopes up that something like that is going well because, let's be honest, it's war. It's not going well.
No.
War doesn't help anyone. It's not. It's a complicated thing, man. But at the end of the day, I like kind of to stick out of that because it's a weird vibe overall. But I would like to, in like our last 5 minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit about outlaw culture in the United States. I'll probably bring this back up in another episode, but I think outlaw culture in the United States is super interesting.
Outlaw culture.
Yeah. It's, I like to call it as the phenomenon within the United States and some other aspects of other countries where we kind of glorify, in a way, people breaking the law and sticking it to the man. Rock and roll style. You know
Okay,
what I mean?
rock and roll style, not in a more, like, kind of like a Edward Snowden, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of like that. Like where, it's kind of died down in recent years just because of...
not bad people. People doing the good thing, but it's...
Well, no, it even is like, street racing.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like...
It's illegal, but it's actually...
It's like, it's kind of like you do that thing? That's pretty cool, you know what I mean? Or it's like cowboys, outlaws, our country was started by outlaws, basically. We threw a bunch of teen or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that's not... it's kind of cool, but it's not, like, crazy cool.
I mean, we had to defy...
Yeah, exactly. Like, breaking the law in the United States is very much a common thing, more or less.
I didn't really think about it. Yeah.
Where if you're an American, you break the law in some capacity or form.
Yeah. But are you talking about the glorification of outlaw culture,
or it's just how much of our own cultural standing, our own cultural personality is ingrained within law breaking and rule breakers and outsiders. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of our culture, or a lot of our famous books,
from people of
the outlaws. Our stories, our folk tales. They're all outsiders. They're
rebels.
Rebels. Yeah, exactly.
People standing up for something they believe in.
Yeah, and it gets. I think that's kind of why sometimes some people get caught up in this idea of, never mind about that thought. It was a dumb thought, but it's really interesting to think about that. So much of our personal or our country's identity is surrounded by this like lawless attitude of like, I'm doing what's good for me and no one can tell me different.
And yeah, that's what America's based on. It's for you to succeed.
Yeah.
And achieve your dreams, and even if that dream is an outlaw.
Yeah, exactly. And moonshining. Moonshining was a big thing. I mean, that basically shaped...
show? That show's fun.
Oh, yeah.
But that shaped the whole...
But I mean, NASCAR had its roots in moonshine running.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So basically, these moonshiners would have to have souped-up hot rods to drive a bunch of moonshine across,
During the Prohibition.
During Prohibition to run at places. So they had to outrace the cops. And a lot of the time, they'd have to do it by dark without any headlights. And, once Prohibition ended, they were just kind of like, well, I don't have to ship booze anymore, but I think I'd really kind of like to keep racing. So that's kind of how NASCAR started.
I'm not really into NASCAR. Are you a NASCAR fan?
I'm a big car history fan.
Car history fan.
Yeah. I know a lot about that. But, we're closing up on the end of our show. I just want to say, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a really fun time.
Some announcements. Same time next week, 12. I'm going to do a nice little Halloween special. Terrifying Tales with Thomas. We're going to do that, and I won't have my script deleted that time. And then at around 5 o'clock on that day next week, we're having the Mr. Zeta competition. Once again, I will have the link or the QR code and link in my YouTube channel. Guilday's Guest at YouTube. It's the one with the Kermit Frog picture. So thank you so much for listening. This has been Guilday's guest at WXSU LP Salisbury. Thanks again. I'll see you
Thank
same
you.
time next week.